With just weeks left in the legislative session, advocates are closely watching proposals to see if they'll pass or miss their chance. And environmental advocates say the clock is ticking to get Connecticut where it needs to go when it comes to renewable energy, trash management, and other issues. We're talking to the Sierra Club about state investments they say could drive down your costs in the long run. But first, housing has certainly been the talk of the chambers. With lack of options in the market, prices sky high, we're talking to Desegregate CT, who says they have solutions if lawmakers will look at zoning reform and transit-oriented building before time is up. Good morning, and thanks for joining us on The Real Story. I'm Emma Wolforst. We're getting right into our discussions this morning with advocates amidst a looming deadline at our state capitol. We're first talking to Desegregate CT's director, Pete Harrison. Pete, thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Of course. So across the board, just about everyone, including the governor, has agreed Connecticut has a housing crisis. Your organization, Desegregate CT, was started to reform policy for more equitable and affordable housing here in Connecticut. But you also say you're just pro-home, period. So tell me, how are these two married in your eyes amidst this crisis?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And we're certainly relieved that the governor and legislators are talking about the housing crisis in a way that was really not present in the last couple of years. And that just goes to the scale of the crisis. I mean, you can't ignore it anymore. So really excited that it is a topic of conversation in the legislature this year. Yeah, we are a pro-homes coalition, and we use that term really consciously because we really believe in all kinds of homes across the board, whether you own a home, you rent a home, whatever that is, we need all of it. We need all of it right away. So a lot of that comes down to land use policies, and it gets kind of wonky for people. How does a zoning reform bill mean more affordable housing or more options for home ownership? But the reality is Connecticut has very bad zoning policies that make it really hard to build anything but single-family housing. We have plenty of that in the state. We do not have other types of homes that a lot more of us in Connecticut need, and that's really what we're trying to make that connection, that zoning reform is a way to address the housing crisis, but not just that, the economic crisis and the climate crisis.
Right. So our affordable housing law, 830G, let's talk about that. The state statute is being discussed a lot as housing is taking center stage, like we said, at the legislature. The law lets developers take a town to court if it rejects their proposals for affordable housing. But if a town stays at a 10% ratio of affordable housing, then they can't get taken to court. The GOP wants to change what counts as affordable housing right now. So what is considered affordable housing in Connecticut right now?
Yeah, 830G tends to be a little bit of a boogeyman for folks. I mean, it really has its origin 30 years ago in a blue ribbon panel to talk about the housing crisis and zoning reform 30 years ago. That's a little bit disappointing. 30 years later, we're still talking about this. But it really was one piece of a larger puzzle of zoning reforms. But really, 830G is based on this 10% recommendation for deed-restricted affordable housing. So what that means is there is actually some kind of deed restriction that limits who can be in that home, whether it's ownership or rentership for a certain economic level of income. And it's typically at 80% of average median income or below. So it could be anything from public housing to private housing with subsidies in it, some cases supportive housing, senior housing, and the like, and that's generally been where it's been centered on, but we obviously want to see more types of affordable housing and other types of all-market housing. Right.
So even as towns add more affordable housing, that 830G ratio, that percentage of affordable housing to full rental value housing, you say doesn't accurately reflect progress. So do you see towns diversifying their housing options, and is there a better way to sort of mark that progress?
Yeah, look, I think there are folks that have good faith concerns about 830G and some of the formulas, and those are always good conversations to have. I think there are a lot of folks that I would say are bad faith that just don't want any affordable housing in their town at all and can say this is a boogeyman that we should be getting rid of. Where that right answer is, I think it's sort of up to legislators. Oftentimes people confuse 830G for an affordable housing policy or zoning policy, and it really is just a builder's remedy as one piece of it. So we often tell communities, and I live in Simsbury, there was just an 830G proposal voted down. Unfortunately, it's going to go to court, it's going to get built. But we often say that if towns were building more housing, more diversity of housing as they have been for 30 years, they wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. So communities certainly have a lot to do to get out of something like that by just building more housing. But of course, as we know, there can be a lot of resistance to that.
And that resistance, when it comes to pushback for affordable housing proposals, we're hearing this outcry for more local control and a fear of top-down government, since zoning decisions usually fall under a town commission. So what do you have to say to people about why you're supporting state intervention and law?
Well, Desegregate CT, we support all. We are an all the above organization. Really, more of our bread and butter is at the local level, trying to convince planning and zoning commissioners that, hey, this is actually a good thing for the town, economically, environmentally, whatever. But there is a role that the state has to play in all of this. And because really over the last 30 years, towns have not been allowing the kind of housing that we need. We are in a deficit of somewhere than 90,000 homes for affordable housing, tens of thousands of other market rate housing. So towns are just not doing enough on their own for this. But we do think that that tenor of either local control or state mandates is kind of a false choice. That's not something that we advocate for. We're advocating in our bill this legislative session, Work, Live, Ride, to really create more of a collaboration. It's locally driven, but it's getting the state to provide resources and funding to make sure towns locally can kind of figure out how to do this, but to nudge them along to do it.
So before we get to Work, Live, Ride, you're saying it's really a combination of both local control, local proposals, and state intervention.
That's right. It has to be all of the above. It has to be the local level, regional thinking, state level, and even the federal government. We've been doing some work at that level. We are in a generational housing crisis. We are not building enough homes for decades. And that's just not something that one state bill or one local community is going to solve on its own. We've all got to come together and figure this out. And that's really where we have found our strength and our value in the conversation, to be that bridge between local communities and the state government.
You mentioned just a lack of housing in general. Right now we're seeing a housing market that doesn't have enough supply, so these costs are skyrocketing. But there's a real concern that a focus on more affordable housing could mean an oversupply, which could then lower surrounding property values. Any reaction to that?
Yeah, we have certainly heard the argument of concern about property values. And I think oftentimes that can be a good faith concern. People are new to this issue, don't understand some of the economics, don't understand some of the downstream effects of these things. And why would they? This stuff's complicated. And I have a master's degree and I'm still trying to figure this stuff out. So somebody being presented by a development for 20 homes next to their apartment or next to their home are probably going to freak out a little bit. That's perfectly fine. But really, empirically, the research that we have done, that others have done across the state, across the country, have really shown that the more diversity of housing options actually increase property values, to the extent that if somebody wants to downsize a house and can't do it in their town, if you can build multifamily homes next to some single-family homes, if it's 2 homes, if it's 3 homes on a lot, that just creates a lot more natural diversity. And there really is no evidence that harms property values. And another good aspect of it with the increase in tax base, you get more tax base out of that multifamily housing than an empty lot or even a single family home in some cases. So there's a win-win for property owners, a win-win for communities at large here.
So let's get to your legislative proposal, this Work, Live, Ride bill. It's all about incentivizing transit-oriented housing. What would that actually look like in our towns here? Yeah,
so, Connecticut, really, the New England character that we all love is actually based around what we call transit-oriented communities. And the idea that whether it was a river, a canal, a railroad, most of the most dynamic places in our state, the neighborhoods that we love were transit-oriented development generations ago. So this is not a new concept to Connecticut, but really at the heart, what it means is just building more homes, more kinds of homes, and also more jobs and services around a bus or train station so people can walk instead of having to drive. And the benefits of that economically, I think, are self-evident, but certainly environmentally, getting people out of cars is better for emissions, protecting our natural spaces. Getting people on trains and buses and walking is better for our health, better for our social health. So we really think it's a pretty simple concept to sell. The challenge is, how do we get communities with a bus station or train station to do this? And the reality is there are communities in Connecticut that have demonstrated this historically or currently. Hey, we like to do this. Transit-oriented development is a win for us. There are other communities that don't have the technical expertise or understand how to kind of do it, don't have the funding to clean up a brownfield site or redevelop, an empty lot or something like that. And that's really the communities that we're targeting with Work, Live, Ride. We've done an immense amount of outreach. We do all these walk audits across the state. We've talked in front of over 40 planning and zoning commissions. We have a really good sense that there are lots of communities in Connecticut that haven't taken that step of doing that kind of zoning, not because they don't want to do this, not because they don't want more affordable housing or more market rate housing. They just kind of don't know the mechanical steps to do that. So rather than have the state helicopter in and say you have to do a certain thing at a certain time, and that's just what it is, we're taking a different approach of saying, you tell us at the local level what station you want this to be around, how big you want this district to be, what you want in it, and the state can provide that technical resources and funding to make sure we can do that.
And what are you seeing in terms of support in the legislature this session from lawmakers for this proposal?
I feel confident we've got the support that we need. We've been really, frankly, pleasantly surprised by a lot of new voices in the legislature talking about this issue from communities that are not necessarily the big cities or even train stations. That's been a really exciting development. And again, I think these folks are hearing from their constituents, we need more housing, we need more housing. I'm worried about traffic and the environment. We're really encouraged that Governor Lamont has name dropped us in many cases and also in his budget proposals. So we think we've kind of hit the right moment politically and at the policy level that folks get this concept. It's a lot of work that we've done in our coalition, a lot of work other advocates have done to kind of lay that groundwork. But now it's getting the details right and getting this law passed.
Last thing here before we let you go, how does this go into desegregation? Some say zoning reform for social equity doesn't necessarily benefit them, but you're saying even those who aren't historically oppressed or disadvantaged when it comes to housing in Connecticut would still benefit from this proposal. How so?
Yeah, we often tell the story for Desegregating Connecticut kind of in 3 acts. And Act 1 is that the zoning we live in now was intensely racially motivated, from redlining to racial covenants, post-1968 to using zoning as a tool to keep economic and racial segregation. That's the world that we live in today. That's why 70% of people of color live in effectively 5 communities in Connecticut. Act 2 of that is our current state, where those kinds of zoning laws that were really racially motivated are kind of screwing us all over. People that are older can't retire and stay in community. Young people can't start their careers. Folks can't move in between communities for different opportunities. And we're all kind of stuck economically and environmentally. The third act is making these kinds of pro-homes policy decisions that will benefit our economy, improve our environment, include the kind of opportunity and personal choice that folks want. If they want to stay in a community that's more dense, great. If they want to live in a more rural part of the state, great. Opening up our zoning and other pro-homes policies like Work, Live, Ride are going to create more opportunity for everybody.
Well, Pete, thank you so much again. The housing crisis is definitely an issue impacting all of us, and we'll see what happens with this bill this session. Thank you again for being here.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Of course. So we've been diving deep into the current housing market, Connecticut's policies, and potential solutions. You can find more of Fox 61's housing reports if you scan this QR code and explore these stories as we keep telling them on our website or on the free Fox 61 News app. Well, still to come this morning on The Real Story, we're talking environmental policy, what new laws could potentially pass and what won't make it out of the legislature this session. With just weeks to go, we're talking to the state director of the Sierra Club about the investments, bans, and policies they say Connecticut needs to stay climate ready and green.